In today's crazy world, we're constantly using things we don't need, doing things we don't like, and never really moving forward or getting the results we're hoping for in either ourselves or our animals. Are you ready for a change? Join me, Wendy Patrick, your host on Quantumly Yours, Finnessiam Health's podcast, and become empowered to take control of you and your animals' health and well-being. We're all quantumly connected, so whether you're round the corner or around the world, it doesn't matter, because we can help each other and all work together on our journeys. So come, join me, and together we'll myth bust, share advice, knowledge, truths, and suggestions to help you awaken, grow, and continue your journey to a healthier, happier life. And hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of Quantumly Yours with your host, me, Wendy Patrick. And we talk about all sorts of stuff. Today, we're going to talk to a real professional who actually knows lots and lots and lots of things. Before we get started with that, I just want to ask you to share our podcast. You can see us on YouTube and BitChute, Rumble, and you'll also find us on Telegram at Finnessiam Holistic Health, and also on you or on Facebook and Instagram. Sorry, all tongue tied and twisted and mixed up. We're recording this on a Monday, in case you can't work that out. So all sorts of other platforms we will try and add, and we'll try and let you know as that happens. All of the links will be in the bottom so that you can like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, and in fact, go to our website, finnessiamhealth.com. So if you are a professional or if you're just a very caring pet or health person who works in the natural field, or even just works with animals, or is a volunteer and has some really good stories, advice, or information to share, we'd love to hear from you as well. So you can contact us through there. So I will now start to introduce my wonderful guest today, who is a very good friend as well. I'm very honored to know this lady and have her in my life, even though she is halfway around the world now in Scotland. But Heather Lang is with me today, and Heather is an osteopath and an ergonomic consultant with 26 years' experience working across the UK and Canada. Her first Bachelor of Science was in Animal Behavior and Bioergonomics, and her second degree is in osteopathy and naturopathy. I tongue twisting all the time, Heather. I apologize for tripping over those. She also has a postgraduate diploma in animal osteopathy and behavior, and also has lots and lots and lots more knowledge than that I know about, because I've known her a long time, and hopefully she'll share some of that with us today. But Heather, welcome to the show.
Hello, Wendy. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. It's an honor. I'm glad you've taken the time out of your hectic schedule, which I know it is, to come and chat with us and our listeners today. So, um, let's hear a wee bit more about you. Tell us more about you, Heather.
Like that, I've been doing biomechanical research and analysis for 26 years. I started off as an ergonomic consultant, but I found I was spending so much time writing legislation for the benefit of the funders as opposed to the benefit of the projects. And I moved into osteopathy because I am passionate about biomechanics. I'm passionate about the human body, but I wanted to help people as opposed to help the legislation and industry.
Absolutely.
Just
That's why we
basically
love
have a
you.
little wheel from the machine.
That's absolutely why we love you. Get the help out to the people who need it, rather than the people who are just making money off it.
It's the lies. It was the
Yes.
lies that I couldn't stand. Um, when I walked onto sites as a brand new, shiny graduate, when I first started, they were like, "Oh, time and motion." I'm like, "No, no, no. I'm here to see if we can do things that will prevent back pain and prevent carpal tunnel syndrome and these repetitive strain injuries, and just generally make your life better." And the workers would turn around and say, "No, you're not. You're time and motion." And as it was, as the veils lifted, yes, for the most part at that time in the early 90s, it was time and motion. Fortunately, now industry seems to be catching up. A lot of the bigger businesses like Google very famously now have beds and trampolines and proper recreational areas for people to recharge. So they're starting to think more about the psychology, but it's a long time coming, and most
Mm.
industry is still basically you are a body, you are a working machine, and not looking at the person inside.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Wow. It's that's kind of mind blowing just to think. And I mean, anybody, even of our timeline, we've never had that opportunity to have a break time where you would go and stretch or jump on a trampoline or go down a slide or actually play. We lost that childishness where we moved. We just don't move anymore. And it was actually until I met you, it was always you sit still, you don't move, you don't speak, you be a good girl, and you do this, this, and this, and you fall into this box, and that's your life. And then I
I
met
know
you, and you're
people.
like, no, no, you have to move, and you were always doing things, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. So you got me out of that stagnant, non-moving entity into this thing that can still do stuff and bend and stretch and things. Go
Well, I
into
always
that a
look
bit
at
more.
primary schools. If you look at a group of primary twos, and there's one of them is, if there's one that's sitting stock still, you kind of put a little question mark over the non-fidgety child. Whereas if you were at a board meeting, you would put a question mark over the one that's kind of fidgeting, because we're taught to be still. You are a spring. You're designed like a great big spring that bounces around the Serengeti chasing antelope. So when people say, "How did this happen?" you think the real question is, why didn't this happen sooner? Because we are so far removed from movement. The two things the body hates: it hates static posture and it hates repetition. And
Mm.
anybody who's tied to a desk, what they're doing is statically repeating movements. And I mean, working from home is now that everybody with COVID, everybody's working from home. They're doing it around the kitchen table on tall, tall stools with low counters, or
Mm.
they're hunched over with the computer on the side of the sofa in these real pretzel positions. And it's crippling people because they're not even getting the exercise of going to the car and going to the office or getting up and walking to the water cooler.
That's
It's
very true.
our society is absolutely crippling people by making it more and more efficient.
Wow. I mean, just thinking as you're saying that as well, we're doing it to our animals.
Absolutely. I mean, I get asked all the time, why would an animal need to see an osteopath? And you think the reason an animal needs to see an osteopath is because it lives in a human world. I mean, one of the reasons we don't keep horses anymore is because 9 times out of 10, I'll walk onto the yard. The person will walk up to me kilted over like that because they've been lifting water buckets all the time. They say, "Oh, my horse walks funny." It's like, no, no, no kissing. So more often than not, it's the human intervention. The number of dogs I have to treat because they haven't been taught to walk on the lead. They've been constantly hauling and hauling at the lead, and then they become lame at the front end because they're choking themselves all the time. They're doing little partial hangings
Yep.
every time they go out for a walk. Or the dog has a basket for its entire life in the corner of the room where it sits in the same position watching the door because they have natural ways of lying. They want to see the door, they want to see their escape routes. So if you don't reposition their point of view, you're going to have an animal that sits in the same position all the time, then
Mm.
that eventually starts to creep into their biomechanics, the same as it does with us.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, my guys are spoiled here because it doesn't matter where I am, they're usually with me in one form or another. So they
Yeah.
probably have about half a dozen different favorite spots in the house. So at least they move whenever I go upstairs or downstairs and things like that. So the benefit, I suppose, in one point with us being stuck at home and furloughed or locked down or whatever you want to call it, is that our animals are now a little bit more active because they don't have to be kept lying in that basket watching the door or stuck in the kennel for longer
Humans
periods of time.
always find a way to mess it up. It's a
Don't
double-edged
we?
sword, that one, because it's great. I mean, the adult dogs, I mean, Lord knows if there's a family of six, that poor little creature is getting walked 12 times a day, um, which is fine for an active dog. But my big fear is an awful lot of people went out and bought puppies over lockdown. And these little puppies are getting walked 6 hours a day. So you may not be seeing the problems immediately, but they're twofold. One is further down the line, all of that forced exercise on a young growing body with
Mm,
such large gaps in the bone platelets, that's asking for problems later on down the line.
yes.
Overuse, they're starting agility with a 3-month-old puppy,
Oh,
which is the same as jumping a 3-year-old horse. And it's like, oh, I've got a 3-year-old horse that'll jump 160. It's the same issue with that impact on a growing skeleton. But the other problem is the poor animals aren't getting any sleep because a dog needs 12 to 14 hours sleep per day. A puppy needs 16 to 20 hours
yep,
sleep per day. And
yep.
getting them and working from home, it's great. Oh, I can take my dog out every half hour. My dog's constantly with me. And it's like,
Doesn't
when
need
is
it
your
every
poor
half
animal
hour.
sleeping?
Uh,
And so that's creating behavioral problems. So on the one hand, yeah, for the good dog owners, it's bliss. It's bliss for the dog owner, it's bliss for the human, providing they're going to continue working from home.
yes,
Um, but this is where the animal behavior side of it is really making my heart cry at times, because a lot of people are getting dogs and we're getting not enough information on training the dog and what the dog needs and enough respect for what the dogs need.
absolutely. Yeah. And just adding that, I mean, a lot of times it's being added to this really nuclear family as it's now become again, but it's been added as a distraction to the kids who are now stuck home from school or whatever else. And it's not actually helping the development of that animal. It's another selfish addition to a household, if you like, to give them something to do, as opposed to what care are you actually giving this animal? What research have you actually put into what care this animal needs? Um, I was on Dave Sherwin's show on the Derobi Health, and it mentioned because he was one of the big things with his setup is the exercise part. And as I said to him, yeah, tired dog's a happy dog, but the backside of that is, and even if it's an older dog that they've inherited or adopted, or it's an older dog that they've had living with them that's now getting all this exercise, the thing is, if your world changes again, then that dog still has to maintain that amount of exercise because you've now got a very fit animal in your house that's going to be going absolutely stir crazy if all of a sudden that stops and you're not doing the 8 mile trek every day, or you're not doing the 2 hour hikes every Saturday and every Thursday and every Tuesday and every Monday afternoon, and it goes back down to a 15-minute around the block. So,
I find
absolutely.
people can get a bit lazy using walking as the only exercise.
Hmm.
5 minutes of strength training is going to tire a dog out way more than an hour and a half walking it around the woods.
Right.
Get the dog using their brains. And when, I mean, I know I've got a border collie puppy, and God love her, she's a little angel. But when she's tired, how I wish I had this absolute dynamic, manic energy whenever I got tired. But she's just like Mach 3 around the living room, but 5 minutes of scent training, and that's her out like a light.
Wow. Isn't that funny?
Otherwise,
Yeah.
the poor little creature, all she's ever going to get told is stop that, don't be, bad dog, which isn't good for anybody's ego.
No. No.
To, no, and this is another problem I see with folk that have gone out and got the dogs and thinking the dog needs the dog needs to be tired. Yes, a
Mm.
tired dog, but a mentally tired dog is a far easier creature to deal with than a physically tired dog.
Yeah.
Because a physically tired dog is more likely to feel sore, well, not necessarily sore, but it's going to feel tired.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, when you're mentally drained and somebody's giving you a hard time, you just can't be bothered with them. Whereas if you're physically tired, you're more likely to hit them.
Well, there's that. Another thing
So
as well, you might have seen or not, and I'm just thinking of this while I'm thinking of it. Would you say then maybe that all of this physical exercise that people think is enough, which we know isn't, is what's causing all of this? Because the most common complaint I get are people contacting me and going, "My dog's awful anxious. My dog's always wound up." All the rest of it's like, is that because they're not getting any mental stimulation?
absolutely. When you go for a run, um, or take physical exercise, um,
I saw that eye roll.
no, when I take physical exercise, it's not so much. There's different ways. There's anatomical people, physiological people, psychological people. Everybody deals with stress in a different way. Physical people go for a run. Physiological people are much more likely to reach for a bar of chocolate when they're stressed. The psychological people need good sit down, good chat with a glass of wine type thing. So people have different ways of expressing stress. If you have somebody that's a very psychological person who just needs to chat, and you try and de-stress them by forcing them to go out for a run, they're just going to get more and more stressed out into their own heads because that's not the way of the triad to get at it. And in the same way with the animals, when the dog is constantly physically tired, they are much more likely to be aggressive. And that's what I meant by, in the same way that a human's more
Wow.
likely to hit somebody, an animal is more likely to attack. I
Well,
remember you a long time ago telling me a story of an Akita,
yes.
um, who basically had a personality transplant when they crate trained the
Yep.
dog,
When they let it
rather
sleep.
than them thinking that the dog was jealous of the baby because the dog's personality changed, but realized the dog isn't getting any sleep.
Yep.
So give the dog a safe space to sleep in. So in the same way, our humans, with everything that's been going on in the last 2 years, humans aren't getting much sleep.
Hmm.
Humans are not getting the right quality of sleep through the 2 hour sleep cycles. And 16 years ago, when I started osteopathy, by far and away, the main reason people took time off work was back pain. And that hasn't actually changed. The numbers of people taking time off for back pain hasn't changed, but
Mm-hmm.
it's now superseded 4 times by people taking time off with stress.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't tend to give stress as much of a consideration as we ought to, either in the human or in the animal. With horses, the main reason the main reason that a horse is going to play up. It's not because it just decided to take the huff with you. It's because it doesn't understand the process and it is stress and it's anxiety. So most behavioral problems that I find in animals are down to tiredness or they're down to anxiety.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of stuff from anxiety for sure. And especially a lot of these situations because they've changed so much. So all of a sudden, the dog that was used to having some really good sleep for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours during the day, where a lot of people are thinking, oh, I'm terrible because I'm leaving my dog alone so long. It's like, no, they were actually getting some time out. They were actually better off because now all of a sudden, yeah, the anxiety calls have just superseded any other calls I've ever had before. It was like, oh, we need something to calm him down. We're going to put him on this, and the vet wants him on that, and oh, we're looking for CBD, and over this and over that, and it's like, all right, give your dog some time to sleep.
Mhm.
Stop annoying it so bloody much. Because you're in its face now all the time. It's like, why is my human here? That's stressful enough. I mean,
I
we're
am a
stressed because we can't
huge,
do what we used to. So's the dog.
no, I'm a huge advocate of crate training,
Yep.
simply because dogs are den animals. They
Yeah.
like a nice little hidey hole where they feel safe and they feel they're not at work.
They need their own
Um,
room, just like you
I
need
get
yours.
so many people saying, it's great. Your dogs are, but I know that also your dogs have their safe places.
Oh, yeah.
So um,
But I
when
don't have
people say, oh
toddlers
no,
running
no, I'm not
around
putting
poking
my dog
fingers
in
at them
prison, I'm
either.
putting it in the house.
Sorry, Heather, I
But
cut you off there.
sorry, I hear so many folks saying that they refuse to put their dog in prison and their
Yeah.
dog has them in the house. This puppy has the run of the house. Now, the way that I see crate training is when you get a new dog, make their world very small. So this is your safe place. This is your environment. This is my environment. When I welcome you into my environment, you have two choices. One of them ends up in a sausage. So the dog, you're just helping them make their choices. And that
Yep.
way, as they develop and they understand and they grow
Hold on a
more.
minute, Heather. I don't think a lot of people will get that. Now, whenever you say one of the choices ends up in a sausage, do you mean that they get a sausage or that they end up going to the factory to become one?
Depends. No, basically, always make your animal think they're the one that's made the choice,
Right.
whether it's a horse or a dog or whatever. Make it think it's their choice. So if you, one of the biggest things that I've had to do with my mare is take her back to square one. Because with animals, we tend to teach them to count to 10 and then expect them to do advanced trigonometry. Because you think, okay, you can come when you're called, you can sit, you can walk on a lead.
Right.
Right. Now identify, okay, this sponge is a bath sponge, so don't chew that. But this sponge is your sponge because it's my old bath sponge, so you can chew that one.
Right.
And how are they supposed to know? But if you crate train them, you're able to expand their world as they're able to cope with it rather than bombarding them. An exercise I would urge anybody to do is try. We did this when we were doing the animal behavior. They picked three of us and said, go out the room, forget everything you know about being a human. So we went out. The first person went in, and what they wanted her to do was just to walk around in a circle and sit down. And the only instruction they gave her was no.
Right.
And in the end of it, she just sat down out of frustration, and they rewarded her for that. Because after about half an hour of just watching her getting more and more frustrated, she just sort of and happened to walk down in a circle and sit down. Okay. So the second person, all he gave them was yes, just nothing but positive affirmation. And it took her about 20 minutes and it was very frustrating, but they wanted her to sit down and roll onto her back. Um, and it was then very trial and error. With me, when I was the third person, I was given positive affirmation and a guide to know that that's the wrong thing. So they said "nya" when it was the wrong one and "yip" when it was the right one, and gave me a pound when they said "yip." So the first thing, knowing nothing about it being a human, when I walked in the room, was which way around does the room go? Because when we walk into a room as a human, you automatically put everything into this 2D picture, whereas a dog sees everything in 3D. So it
Oh, this
doesn't
is cool.
fully understand, the table is just as valid as the floor, is just as valid as that shelf on the wall. And then if you can actually go around, it's a very different way of looking at it. But
Huh.
given the first person took half an hour to sit on the floor, the second person took half an hour to sit on the floor and roll over, I took 10 minutes with yip and yip to find a diary that was on the desk and look up the German dialing code.
Holy cow.
So,
Wow. That's incredible.
so the two things that I got from that is one, let them know that that's not the answer you're looking for. So I use try again. And be careful with your commands because
Yes,
people use down when they want the dog to lie on the ground, but they also say down when the dog's jumping up on them.
exactly.
So be very specific, one command. And then
Yes,
when you finish one training, that command, make a clear stop and then start the next commands
right.
because otherwise it gets confusing for the dog.
Yes. And I came from Barbara Woodhouse and then Gary Wilkes and Sarah Wilson's camps and various versions of different things in between. But wrong was always the neutral one that I got from Gary Wilkes because no is said in every other sentence that you say on a day-to-day conversation with another human in your house. So no
Mhm.
means absolutely nothing because there's no consequence to it to a dog. But if you say wrong is more of a neutral because it doesn't actually hold that much energy either, it actually sounds like a very neutral word. So you're not actually identifying or punishing or rewarding by just saying wrong,
Yeah.
which was kind of the nice pause. Let's do that again. Um, so yeah,
I
different
use
things like that with working.
let's train.
Hmm?
I would go, let's train, and we start. And then at the end of it, I go, and that to her knows it's all done. Or let's play. Or but and
Let's
then
go.
again, and then we start again. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I always use try again, but then also instead of good girl or anything like that, I go good choice. If she's made a choice, then always just good choice because there's all yeah, like you say, yes is used in so many. Like, good girl
Or a
is used,
click. Or the
Yes,
clicker.
actually, clicker training as a clicker training I use yet, rather than the clicker because by the time I've got the clicker organised and done that, the
Yeah,
moment
a
has
lot, a
gone.
lot. It's easy to teach a lot of newbies, if you like, though, with the clicker because it's more of an identifying noise that
Uh-huh.
everybody is consistent with, especially because if I'm going to do any training with someone, I only used to do private in home training, which of course we can't do that at the minute. But the clicker would be then passed from the 5 year old to the adult male to the adult female to the teenage person or whatever, and it always sounded the same. So there was the consistency which helped the dog to identify what was the
Mhm.
correct response. So that's a very, very nice way to bridge the gap until the humans and the dogs understand what's required and what the dog's capable of doing at the same time. So it's always a nice way to bridge. But Heather, we've flown way off track on what we were going to talk about today. So I think we're going to have you back. But this was a really interesting chat just about the whole behavioral side of things. So why don't we wrap that up for today and let's have you back really, really soon. And we'll talk about some other things because I know I had some things that I wanted to ask you about. So would you be okay about coming back again?
Absolutely, it's always lovely to speak to you, Wendy.
Oh, I know. I always love the excuse to do it as well.
Mhm.
All right, Heather. Well, we will talk to you later then. And folks, hopefully you've enjoyed this. And if you've any questions and stuff as well, please let us know. Contact us through the links or through any of the ways that you've watched or listened to us and we will get back to you. Something else I've mentioned with our other guests, and I will mention again with yourself, Heather, that at some point, if we have any interest in doing so, we would like to do maybe a live Zoom call where we have some of our guest speakers back again, where we can do a Q&A with some select people who decide that they want to jump onto that. So maybe you'd be interested in that as well, Heather. I'm sure that would be almost like a day's worth of Q&As wouldn't we get everybody on because we've got a lot of people coming on and a lot of people on already that's got lots and lots of information. So hopefully we will get out there and get to some of the masses and help them out, because the whole point behind us is empowering people to make better choices and to understand different things that they can do instead of sitting inside that box, because there is no box. All right, Heather, lovely again to have you. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Wendy.
much for joining. And we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us on Quantumly Yours today. And stay possum.
All information, products, and topics discussed in the show are simply the host and guest's personal opinions and are for informational purposes only. None claim to offer a diagnosis, treatment, or cure. All listeners and viewers are encouraged to do their own research and consult with their own healthcare providers before changing or adapting any new protocols. Finnessiam Holistic Health, nor any of its entities, assume any responsibility or liability for any consequence relating directly or indirectly from the information contained within the podcast.